The restaurant smelled of money. Not just the scent of truffle pasta and aged wine, but the kind of old money wealth that clung to the polished marble floors, the velvet drapes, the hushed voices of patrons who never had to check the price on a menu. Lily Evans sat across from Jimmy Lancaster, the man who had just offered her $50,000 like it was pocket change. She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. "You need a what?" Jimmy smirked, lifting his glass of whiskey with effortless grace. "A fiancée. For one weekend." Lily scoffed, glancing around the upscale restaurant, feeling completely out of place in her thrift store dress and scuffed shoes. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." Jimmy's smirk didn't falter. "And yet, you're still here, listening." She hated that he was right, but desperation was louder than pride. She exhaled. 50 grand is a lot of money. Consider it easy money. All you have to do is smile, act in love with me, and survive my family's annual gathering." Lily narrowed her eyes. "And what's the catch?" Jimmy's expression turned cold, all amusement vanishing. No questions, no complications. "Just play your role." Something about his tone made her pause. She had waited tables for years, overhearing business deals, breakups, drunken confessions, but nothing had ever felt as dangerous as this moment. Because Jimmy Lancaster wasn't just a rich man. He was the Jimmy Lancaster, billionaire heir, ruthless businessman, the kind of man who could crush people without ever raising his voice. And she was Lily Evans, a broke waitress drowning in debt. She should have said no. She should have walked away. But then she thought of her brother, Oliver. 19 years old, sick, his medical bills piling up so high that she had stopped opening the envelopes. $50,000. It wasn't just easy money, it was a lifeline. She met Jimmy's gaze. "Fine, I'll do it." His smirk returned, slow and victorious. But just as she reached out to shake on the deal, Jimmy leaned in, his voice dangerously smooth. "One more thing," he murmured. "Whatever happens that weekend, you can't fall in love with me." Lily snorted, gripping his hand firmly as she shook it. "Trust me," she said. "That won't be a problem." The Lancaster estate was a kingdom of cold perfection. Lily stared out the car window as the iron gates opened, revealing a mansion so large it looked more like a European palace than a home. The long cobblestone driveway was lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, statues of Greek gods standing tall like silent judges. Even the air here smelled expensive, like aged wood, old money, and something painfully untouchable. Jimmy pulled the car to a smooth stop, his face impassive, but Lily noticed how his fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel before he exhaled and stepped out. She followed, gripping the fabric of her dress, a rented designer gown that fit her body perfectly, yet still made her feel like a fraud. A butler opened the front doors, revealing an opulent chandelier, marble floors, and a grand staircase that looked like it belonged in a museum. But the house wasn't warm. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt empty, loveless. And then they came. The Lancasters. The first to greet them was Richard Lancaster, Jimmy's father. Tall, with silver hair and eyes like ice, he exuded power. He wasn't just wealthy, he was a man who commanded the world and expected it to obey. He barely glanced at Lily before turning to Jimmy. "You're late," he said, his tone clipped. Jimmy smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Good to see you too, Dad." Next came Victoria Lancaster, Jimmy's mother. Regal, poised but emotionally absent. Her perfectly manicured fingers barely touched Jimmy's cheek in what seemed like an attempt at affection before she turned her critical gaze to Lily. "You must be the fiancée," she said smoothly, her tone neutral but assessing. Lily forced a sweet smile. "Lily Evans, it's a pleasure to meet you." Victoria didn't return the smile. And then there was Lucas Lancaster, Jimmy's younger brother. Lily immediately noticed the tension between them. Lucas was Jimmy's opposite, leaner, a little more disheveled, and with a simmering resentment in his eyes. "You're really engaged?" Lucas asked, voice laced with disbelief. Jimmy's smirk returned, his arm slipping around Lily's waist, pulling her close. "Jealous, little brother?" Lucas scoffed, rolling his eyes before stalking away. Lily didn't have time to process the complex family dynamics before the final, most important figure entered the room. Eleanor Lancaster, the matriarch, the true ruler of the Lancaster Empire. She was small but powerful, her sharp gray eyes missing nothing. She walked with a cane, but Lily could tell it was purely for show. This was not a woman who needed anyone's help. She stopped before them, her gaze piercing straight through Lily. "You're the girl who tamed my grandson?" she asked, voice rich with skepticism. Lily smiled, unshaken. "I like to think we tamed each other." Eleanor's lips curved ever so slightly, intrigued. Dinner, however, was the true battle. The dining hall was straight out of a period drama, a long oak table, gold-rimmed plates, an atmosphere so suffocating it could crush a person. Lily sat beside Jimmy, acutely aware of the stares, the whispers. Eleanor, at the head of the table, took a slow sip of her wine before her gaze landed on Lily. "So," she began, voice casual but dangerous, "how did you two meet?" Lily's heart jumped. She felt Jimmy's subtle tension beside her, but he didn't speak, he was letting her handle it. Lily smiled, her voice dripping with confidence. "Oh, it was love at first sight," she said, placing her hand lightly over Jimmy's. "Jimmy swept me off my feet." Eleanor hummed, unimpressed. "Is that so?" Lily nodded, holding Jimmy's gaze with deliberate fondness. Eleanor set down her wine glass. Then, with a sharp glint in her eyes, she asked, "Tell me, dear, what's Jimmy's biggest fear?" The table went silent. Lily felt Jimmy freeze beside her. She knew this was a test, a trap. But she also knew the answer. She turned to Jimmy, studying him for a single second, the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers twitched ever so slightly on the table. She had seen that look before. She had seen it in herself. Lily smiled softly, then turned back to Eleanor. "Being vulnerable," she said simply. A heavy pause drowned the room. Jimmy's head snapped toward her, his blue eyes wide with shock. Eleanor, for the first time that night, looked genuinely intrigued. "Well," she murmured, lifting her glass, "that is quite an interesting answer." Lily just smiled, acting as if she hadn't just revealed something Jimmy had spent his whole life hiding. But Jimmy couldn't stop looking at her. Later that night, the corridors of the Lancaster estate were quiet, the weight of the evening still lingering in the air. Lily had just reached the guest room when a voice stopped her cold. "How the hell did you know that?" She turned, finding Jimmy standing in the shadows, his blue eyes stormy, intense. Lily crossed her arms, feigning indifference. "Know what?" Jimmy stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Don't play games with me, Lily. No one knows that about me." Lily held his gaze, refusing to back down. "Because it's written all over you," she said softly. Jimmy inhaled sharply, as if her words had punched him in the gut. For years, no one had seen him. No one had ever looked past his wealth, his arrogance, his perfectly constructed walls. But she did. There was undeniable tension now, something thick, uncharted. Jimmy's jaw clenched. He shook his head as if trying to clear a thought. "This is just a job for you," he muttered. "Don't forget that." Lily tilted her head, studying him. "Is that what you keep telling yourself?" Jimmy's hands curled into fists. He had been in control this entire weekend, but now, he felt like Lily Evans had just flipped his entire world upside down. The Lancaster estate was a world of champagne flutes, crystal chandeliers, and polished lies wrapped in designer clothing. For 2 days, Lily played her role perfectly. She held Jimmy's hand at brunch, laughed at his dry, sarcastic remarks, and let him rest a possessive hand on her waist when his family's judgmental eyes lingered too long. But something strange was happening. The more time they spent together, the more the lie stopped feeling like a lie. It started with the little things. At one of the Lancaster family's endless luncheons, his mother made a comment. Victoria, sipping wine, expression cool. "So, Lily, what exactly do you do?" Lily, smiling politely, "I'm a waitress." Victoria, raising an eyebrow, tone passive but sharp. "How charming." There was a beat of silence, subtle but sharp enough to cut. Lily could handle snobbery, she had dealt with worse. But before she could even respond, Jimmy's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Jimmy, calm but cold. She's not just a waitress. She works 2 jobs to take care of her family. And unlike most of the people in this room, she actually knows what hard work looks like." The entire table froze. Eleanor Lancaster's lips twitched in amusement as she watched her grandson. "Lily?" She stared at Jimmy, stunned. For the first time, she realized he wasn't just playing his part anymore. That evening, the sky turned violent. Thunder rumbled as rain pounded against the windows. The Lancaster family had scattered across the estate, and Jimmy, in an effort to escape his father's disapproving stares, had taken Lily for a drive through the endless acres of family-owned land. The rain came down harder, and soon, the winding roads were nearly impossible to navigate. "Great," Jimmy muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "Of course." Lily smirked. "What's the matter, Lancaster? Never driven in a storm before." He shot her a glare, but before he could respond, lightning cracked across the sky, and the engine sputtered. The car rolled to a halt. "Are you kidding me?" Jimmy groaned, running a hand through his hair. Lily burst out laughing. "This isn't funny," he grumbled. "Oh, it absolutely is," she said, wiping at her eyes. "The great Jimmy Lancaster, taken down by a little rain." Jimmy sighed, checking his phone. No signal. "We need to find shelter," he said. "There's an old hunting cabin on the property. We can wait there until the storm passes." The cabin was small, but warm, with a stone fireplace and a couch that looked as ancient as the Lancaster fortune itself. Jimmy threw wood into the fireplace, lighting it with ease. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly as she sat on the couch. Jimmy noticed. Without a word, he shrugged off his expensive tailored jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Lily blinked up at him. "You're being nice." Jimmy smirked, sitting beside her. "Don't get used to it." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the storm raging outside. Then Lily spoke. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" Jimmy turned toward her, frowning. "What?" "Your family," she said. "They act like you'll never be enough, and you just let them." Jimmy's jaw tightened. "Duh. Because I never have been enough," he admitted. "Not for them." Lily studied him, really studied him. She had always seen Jimmy Lancaster, the billionaire, the arrogant businessman. But here, in the dim firelight, she saw Jimmy Lancaster, the man. He exhaled. "My father wanted someone like him, someone cold, ruthless, perfect. I was never that. And my mother, she only cares about appearances." Lily's chest tightened. She wasn't sure why, but she reached out, taking his hand. Jimmy stiffened for a second. Then, slowly, he relaxed. "Maybe you're not as heartless as you pretend to be," she whispered. Jimmy turned his head, his blue eyes locked onto hers. "Maybe you're not as immune to me as you pretend to be," he murmured, smirking. Her breath caught. The air shifted. They were too close now. His gaze flickered to her lips. And for a moment, just a moment, Lily thought he was going to kiss her. But then, Jimmy pulled away. "We should get some sleep," he said, voice rough. Lily swallowed hard, nodding. But neither of them slept that night. The next evening, the Lancasters hosted their annual gala, a grand, over-the-top event filled with Manhattan's wealthiest elites. Lily was doing her best to blend in, but when she walked past the hallway leading to the study, she heard voices. Richard Lancaster's voice. "You're a disappointment, Jimmy," Richard said, his tone scathing. Lily's body froze. "I gave you everything," Richard continued, his voice low but cutting. "And yet you'll never be anything more than a failure." Lily's blood boiled. She turned the corner before she could stop herself. "Funny," she said, stepping into the room. "Because the man you're calling a failure is 10 times the person you'll ever be." Richard's eyes darkened. "Excuse me?" Lily stepped closer, unafraid. "You think you can break him down just because you're his father? That's not strength. That's pathetic." The room fell silent. Jimmy stared at her, completely stunned. Then, a slow smirk spread across Eleanor's lips. "I like her," the old woman murmured, sipping her champagne. Richard's face was red with fury, but Lily didn't care. She turned on her heel and walked back toward the ballroom, rage and adrenaline still pulsing in her veins. But before she could take another step, a strong hand grabbed her wrist and pulled her into a quiet corner of the hallway. Jimmy. His eyes burned with something intense, something she couldn't name. "Why the hell did you do that?" he demanded, his voice low, rough. Lily yanked her wrist free, because someone had to. Jimmy stared at her for a long moment. Then, before she could say another word, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, consuming, like he had been holding himself back for too long and finally gave in. Lily's hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing him back with just as much fire. When they finally broke apart, their breaths were ragged, their foreheads almost touching. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. This wasn't part of the deal. Jimmy smirked, brushing a thumb over her cheek. "No," he murmured, "it wasn't." The morning after the gala, everything felt different. Lily woke up in the guest room of the Lancaster estate, the sheet still carrying the faint scent of Jimmy's cologne from when he had walked her there last night. Her lips still tingled from the kiss they had shared, from the way his hands had gripped her like he couldn't let go. For a moment, she let herself believe, maybe this was real. But then, she stepped into the grand dining room and reality hit her like a brick wall. Jimmy sat at the far end of the long table, a coffee cup in his hand, his expression completely unreadable. Gone was the warmth in his eyes, the flicker of something real that had been there last night. He was cold again, distant, untouchable. "Morning," she said, trying to sound normal. He barely glanced at her. "We leave in an hour." The words knocked the air out of her chest. That was it. After everything that happened, he was just going to pretend none of it mattered. Lily pulled out a chair and sat down, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "Right? Because this was just a deal, right?" Jimmy's jaw tightened slightly, but his expression didn't change. "This was never real, Lily." His voice was calm, deliberate. "We had an agreement, nothing more." Lily felt something in her chest crack open, but she refused to show it. She let out a small, humorless laugh, shaking her head. "Got it. No need to say it twice." Jimmy didn't respond. He just took a slow sip of his coffee, his hands steady. Lily hated him in that moment. Not because he was breaking the illusion, but because somewhere deep down she had started to believe in it. She pushed back her chair and stood up. "I'll get my things." She was about to walk away for good when a voice called her back. "Lily, dear, a moment?" "Eleanor Lancaster." Lily turned, trying to gather herself as the older woman gestured for her to follow her into the sunroom. Something about Eleanor's expression felt different. More serious. More urgent. The sunroom was warm, filled with antique furniture and the scent of roses from the garden outside. Eleanor settled into a chair, folding her delicate hands in her lap as she studied Lily. "You look just like her," she murmured. Lily blinked. "Like who?" Eleanor let out a slow sigh, her eyes distant, like she was looking at something from a lifetime ago. "My daughter," she said softly. "The one I was forced to give up." Lily froze. Her mind struggled to process the words. "What?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Years ago, before I married into this family, I had a child. A daughter. But my family owed money, strict, unyielding, considered her a scandal. I was given no choice. She was taken from me, given away." Lily's heartbeat thundered in her ears. No, this couldn't be. Eleanor's gaze bored into hers. "Her name was Margaret," she said. "Margaret Evans." Lily's breath caught in her throat. Margaret Evans. Her mother. Everything stopped. The air, the sounds, the ground beneath her feet. Eleanor took her hand gently, but her grip was firm, unshakable. "You are my granddaughter, Lily." Lily yanked her hand back, stumbling away from her as if burned. No, that's not." Her voice shook. Her stomach twisted. Her entire life she had believed she was just a girl from nowhere, a struggling waitress, a nobody. But now she was one of them. The same family she had spent all weekend pretending to belong to. The same family she had secretly despised. I need air," Lily whispered, turning on her heel. She ran before Eleanor could stop her. But she didn't get far. Because standing just outside the door, listening to everything, was Jimmy. Jimmy's expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned. Lily froze, still struggling to breathe. How much of that was real? Jimmy's voice was low, sharp, dangerous. Lily shook her head, her pulse hammering. "Jimmy, His jaw clenched. "Did you know?" Lily's throat was too tight to speak. He took a slow step closer, his gaze flickering with something dark. "So this was your plan all along?" he asked, voice quiet, but lethal. "Worm your way into my family. Pretend to be something you're not." The accusation hit her like a slap. She stared at him, stunned. "You think I wanted this?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Jimmy let out a short, humorless laugh. "I don't know, Lily. Maybe I was stupid enough to think you were different." Lily felt something in her chest crack wide open. She had spent her entire life fighting for every single thing she had. She had never wanted this family, this name, this world of privilege. And yet, here he was, looking at her like she was the villain. Her hands curled into fists. "You really think I planned this?" she demanded. Jimmy's silence was answer enough. Lily's palm struck his cheek before she could stop herself. The sound echoed through the hallway. Jimmy's head snapped to the side, but he didn't move. He just stood there, his jaw tight, his breathing heavy. Tears burned behind Lily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had let herself care. She had let herself believe in him. But she wasn't going to beg. Not for his belief. Not for anything. "I never wanted any of this," she whispered. Jimmy still wouldn't look at her. She swallowed the lump in her throat, turned on her heel, and walked away. This time for real. The weeks without her were unbearable. Jimmy had always believed he was good at being alone. He had spent his entire life keeping people at a distance, making sure no one got close enough to hurt him. But now, Lily was gone. And for the first time, he realized he had never really been alone before. Not until her absence hollowed him out. He tried to go back to his life, board meetings, expensive dinners, his father's cold approval. But nothing felt right anymore. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at him before she walked away, like she had actually loved him, like he had been worth loving, and he had thrown it away. Meanwhile, Lily was trying to rebuild her life. She had walked away from the Lancaster name, the money, the legacy. Eleanor had offered her everything, but Lily had refused. She didn't want their wealth. She just wanted her old life back. But even that didn't feel the same anymore. The tiny apartment that once felt like her safe place now felt empty. Because he wasn't in it. Because for all her strength, she missed him. She missed his smirk, his sarcasm, the way he always saw right through her bullshit. She missed the way he had looked at her, like she was the one thing he never expected but somehow couldn't live without. And then, one night, everything changed. A thunderstorm raged outside as Lily curled up on her couch, pretending she wasn't waiting for something. For someone. A knock at the door shattered the silence. She frowned, standing slowly, her heartbeat skipping in her chest. When she opened the door, she sucked in a breath. Jimmy stood there, soaking wet, rain dripping from his hair, his shirt clinging to his body. His eyes burned into hers, raw, desperate. "I don't care who you are, Lily," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "All I know is I can't lose you." Her chest tightened painfully. "You hurt me, Jimmy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know." He stepped forward, hands shaking. "And I'll spend forever making it up to you if you let me." Her vision blurred. "How do I know you won't push me away again?" "Because this time I'm not running," he said, voice breaking. "I'm here, and I'm never leaving." And then he got down on one knee. Not because of a contract. Not because of his family. But because he was choosing her. "Marry me, Lily," he whispered. "For real. No lies, no deals. Just us." Lily let out a choked laugh, tears falling freely now. She dropped to her knees, grabbing his face, kissing him so hard that she could taste the rain and the love and the promise between them. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. 1 year later. The sun set in golden streaks across the Lancaster estate as music floated through the warm evening air. The garden had been transformed into something magical, string lights hanging from the trees, white roses lining the stone pathway. Jimmy stood at the center of it all, watching as his wife swayed in his arms. Lily. His wife. She wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, but to him, she was the most beautiful thing in the world. Eleanor watched from her seat, a rare, genuine smile on her face. Even Richard Lancaster had shown up, his disapproval finally silenced by the undeniable truth: Jimmy had made his own path. And he had won. As they danced, Lily leaned in, her voice soft. "Remember when you told me not to fall in love with you?" Jimmy smirked, brushing his lips against her ear. "Biggest lie ever told." And as they moved under the stars, wrapped in love that was never a lie, Jimmy finally understood. This was what it meant to have everything. As Jimmy and Lily swayed under the stars, surrounded by love, laughter, and the family they had both fought to find, one thing was clear: this was never just a deal. It had always been real. And sometimes the most unexpected love stories are the ones that were written in the stars all along. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more unforgettable tales of love, resilience, and second chances. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that will make you laugh, cry, and believe in love all over again. Thank you for watching, and remember, true love is never just a deal. It's a choice.